use a cyclically adjusted target, which nobody has mentioned it so far. But what's very, very clear is that depending on the cycle, the figure has to be flexible. There is a notion like Gordon Brown's golden rule in England, where he said that, borrowing will only be earmarked for projects, no borrowing for... So there are various other issues to be looked at apart from just that fiscal target. So relook at FRBM is entirely justified. It is in no sense contradictory. Right. But just to take up one thing, Mr. Shanti Das says, what do you guys mean by Big Bang? Okay, let me tell you. And the same thing I told Jaitley in New York.
I'm going to come to you to outline your Big Bang and why it hasn't been delivered. But I must get a word out of you, Mr. Butani. In your view, and of course I'm sure you've had a call with all your clients and the really high-profile ones, corporate India was of the view that they should loosen their purse strings. They can let the fist expand and they can justify it. They've still not done that. What are corporates telling you, and what in your assessment, what's the verdict out there?
Well, I'm not going to use jargons, is it transformational, smart, or path-breaking, but I think the budget is unorthodox. And I'll tell you the reason why I use this term. I think there was a lot of temptation for him to loosen the fiscal deficit. In fact, I was betting that he would not meet the fiscal deficit target. So I think that's one reason. And he had all the reasons: global crisis, shortfall in tax collection, so on and so forth. The reason it is unorthodox is because we have seen successive budgets ignoring the ease of doing business from a tax policy and tax administration standpoint. So the larger picture from a tax reforms agenda is that he's trying to tax the rich a little bit more and put this money on to the social schemes. I also feel that in the fine print for the budget, a lot of the past seems to have been buried, which suggests to me that here is a government that's willing to listen and act on it. And the two prime examples are place of effective management. I mean, I have gone on record saying it was like an unguided tax missile, which was legislated last year, and the guidelines suggested the same thing. So that has been deferred. Vodafone and retrospective tax bogey, now you have a law which will deal with how do you settle the past cases. We are talking about dispute resolution. We are talking about voluntary disclosure schemes. So I think if you look at it from a tax policy and administration standpoint, and there are a lot in the fine print to be able to address the ease of doing business in India, I certainly feel...
So you call it an unorthodox budget? Okay.
I think it's unorthodox.
Right. We've got two more ground areas to cover, but before that I want Swami to take on Shaktikanta Das. When you said that, when Mr. Das said that, what is the Big Bang that you're looking for? Swami, why don't you tell us what is the Big Bang that you were looking for in this budget?
I wasn't necessarily looking in this budget because I've lost faith. But you say, what is the Big Bang? No problem. Privatize the 10 worst public sector banks, corporatize the railways and all the ports, and put at least 100 politicians and businessmen in jail within 2 years. Well, I think nice, easy Big Bang.
I don't know if Mr. Das can answer on the third point, but on the first 2 points, Mr. Das, we had Yashwant Sinha join us a short while ago, and he made the same point as well. I don't know why in this current establishment, privatization is seen as such an ugly word. Do you think that the government could have done more on that? And I'm going to come to Mr. Amitabh Kant as well, because as a CEO of Niti Aayog, he's going to be handling a lot of the strategic sale that the finance minister spoke about. But Mr. Das, you want to comment on the point that Swami made?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I must mention that, it's a privilege to be on the same panel which has Swaminathan Iyer. I always read his writings with a lot of interest. And look, let us also remember that, the privatization of the banks, he also mentioned about privatization of the railways. Railways are undertaking a lot of PPP projects. So far as the banks are concerned, the finance minister has announced a roadmap in this year's budget, 25,000 crore of recapitalization money, with a clear-cut assurance that if more funds are required, he would find the resources for it. And as my former colleague, Dr. Mairam said, in a budget of about 20 lakh crores, it will not be difficult to find savings of another 5,000-7,000 crores to top it up during the course of the year, as we have done during this year. The finance minister has also talked in terms of a roadmap for consolidation of banks, because our banks need to be, our public sector banks need to be efficient, they need to be big. So now at the moment, therefore, the priority of the government is to consolidate, to sort of accelerate the process of consolidation of the public sector banks. And maybe, as I think as the Prime Minister had said some time ago, maybe we should have about 7, 8 or 10 banks eventually. So that roadmap is also under preparation. A lot of work has been sort of undertaken in that, and the bank BBB, that is the Bank Board Bureau, also has now been constituted. So it is a question of achieving your objective, the instrumentality of achieving it. I respect Swaminathan Iyer's view that you should have gone for privatization, but after a lot of deliberation within the government, we felt that it is better to sort of go for a consolidation process at the moment.
Just to get Mr. Kant very quickly into this debate, and now that you'll be at Niti Aayog, you'll be in charge of identifying strategic sales. 20,500 crore is the target this year. Any PSUs already on your radar, Mr. Kant? And this is going to require some amount of courage, some amount of will to go through, because governments in the past haven't been able to do so. And this government especially seems to be very wary of the word privatization or strategic sales.
No, Supriya, I'm a great believer that we must give a big impetus to disinvestment, and the clear strategy has to be that public sector must perform or perish. And we've done this earlier. Just during an earlier regime when Mr. Vajpayee was the Prime Minister, we've driven disinvestment very forcefully. There's no rationale at all for government to run hotels. They must be sold off. There's no rationale for government to run public sector units which have been running in losses for many years. So I think we lay down a clear roadmap for that and push this very hard. But one thing which I find very pleasing about the budget is that it focuses on several aspects of use of technology. It focuses very sharply on direct benefit transfer across several schemes. It focuses very strongly on ease of doing business. And I think if you put it in totality, all these measures together will bring in a huge efficiency into the functioning of several schemes across government.
Mr. Kant, I have an interesting question coming your way, since you've coined many a phrase in the past, whether it's Incredible India or Make in India. What is the phrase you have in mind for the strategic sale initiative? You obviously can't have Sell India.
I haven't started my job in Niti Aayog. I'm going to begin that tomorrow. So that requires a lot of homework. It requires a lot of research. It requires a lot of homework. So you've got to give me breathing time on that.
Sure enough.
All right. The fourth question, the fourth topic that we want to cover is PSU bank recapitalization. And I know Mr. Kant spoke about it briefly. And I want to throw it to Maitri first. Our expert when it comes to banking. Maitri, everyone knows about the gravity or the extent of the NPA problem. And people thought that it will be addressed in a more holistic manner in this budget. PSU bank recapitalization was obviously one way of doing it. Are you disappointed with what they have done on PSU bank recapitalization?
Yes, certainly. If the government was committed to recapitalization, the numbers, it's just peanuts, because this is what you had talked about in the scheme. That was a year ago. Since then, the position of banks has deteriorated considerably. In fact, informal numbers from various rating agencies, etc., say the quantum money required is 7 lakh crores. As against which you set aside 25,000 crores, which is neither here nor there, in which case you might as well have saved that 25,000 crores. Either you provide more or you don't provide this and use it somewhere else. So if you were to boost the economy, that itself would have taken care of a lot of the problems of the bank. So this is neither here nor there.
So actually the eco-survey, Dr. Mayram, talks about 1,90,000 crore that Indian PSU banks require up until the fiscal year 2019. Having said that, is the government underestimating the problem? I mean, what do they have in mind?
I think the gravity of the situation was recognized as back as July 2014, when the finance minister had announced that the PSU holdings of the government will be brought down to a level of 52%, which would have actually unlocked almost 1,25,000 crores, which could go back into the capital of the banks. Which would be substantial infusion of capital if you could relate it to 1,90,000 crores or so, which the economic service says is required. Yeah. But nothing has happened on that. I mean, that is what I was mentioning earlier when I was asking Shakti, how much do you really believe that these announcements will be implemented? Because they are announced, but there's no going forward on them in many of these which were very critical. Right.
very critical and very...
And Yashwant Sinha's budget so many years ago talked about lowering government stake to 33%. We got
that I can tell you is not happening in this government or some governments to come.
Shaktikant, you want to comment on that? I'm sure you would have got a sense that on PSU bank recapitalization, surely the expectation was you could have done more. I understand you were constrained for resources, especially since you didn't want to cross that Lakshman Rekha on the fiscal deficit. But 25,000 crores seems inadequate.
And if I may just add, is this the first tranche for the benefit of our viewers? Will you clarify? Are you going to put in more money? What is the sum you have in mind?
He can't say that now.
You asking me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Now the provision in the budget, if you look, remember, if you recollect the mention, the number which was given in Indradhanush, it talked of 25,000 crore for the current year. We have discussed the requirement of recapitalization with the banks and also with the regulator, that is the Reserve Bank of India. And after discussion, it's not a unilateral provision which we have made. We have discussed with the banks, we have discussed with the Reserve Bank of India, and after that we have decided that 25,000 crore is sufficient for the moment. There will be many more steps which will follow, and you will have to, I cannot spell it out, but you will have to see how it unfolds. And let me reiterate once again that additional funds, as the Finance Minister has mentioned, as and when they are required during the course of the year, they shall be provided. But let me say that this provision has been made after a lot of deliberation within the government and with the banks and with the Reserve Bank of India.
All right, many provisions made with the banks, with the Reserve Bank of India. We actually must ask you this question, Swami, then. Are you okay with 25,000 crore rupee PSU recapitalization and the plans and the whole plan that, yes, stake sales will happen this year? But remember, stake sales didn't happen when the markets were booming, and now that they're down, I wonder how will they go ahead and do so.
No, I think you need to distinguish between the total recap, a lot of which will be in the form of bonds of various kinds, and equity. This 25,000 is only the equity.
That's right.
For which he says we don't need more than this, but it does mean you'll have to raise much, much more in the form of bonds in an hostile, in an unfavorable environment, with the help of the LIC and other organizations. It may be possible, in fact, to do that. So I said, I think you will go forward. I think the problem is not just that do they have enough money? Is there any demand for credit? Right now, I mean, K.V. Kamath was saying there was time when, they would have 3 meetings in a week, and each meeting would have 15 proposals, and now you have 1 meeting in a week, and it may have 1 proposal or 2 proposals. Right. So it is not the case that there is a huge demand for credit, and oh my gosh, can the banks meet it?
All right. Okay. Sure. Let's talk about the other key aspect that we need to cover as well, which is, do the numbers add up? It's always interesting to look at it at the end of the day on a budget day. Look at, is the math in place? Are the assumptions too optimistic? Mukesh Butani, I want to come to you first. You've looked at the fine print very closely. On balance, do the numbers add up? Because there's some amount of concern on some of the revenue side projections, the nominal growth projections as well. How does it look to you first?
So the overall projection on the tax revenues of the government is reasonable. It's just hovering around 11%. But if you look at it from an excise duty and a customs standpoint, the projection sounds very bullish. And this is a question that we asked Mr. Shaktikanta Das earlier as well, and the Revenue Secretary as well. He mentioned that there is no specific projection that has been made for what the government will collect out of the VDIS scheme, because it's not a revenue mobilization measure. Now, that means that this question is even more important. How are you going to achieve more than 15% collection on the customs and excise duty side? The reason being, a significant part of excise duty leg up that was received last year was because of petroleum products. Now, if the movement of crude oil prices from an average of $45 in 15-16 is going to be $35 in 16-17, the leg up on excise duty on petroleum products is not going to be high. So on the math, my only question was, how are you going to meet the overall increase in excise and custom duty collection?
Talking about custom duty collection, Mr. Das, I have a question for you, and I was a little intrigued when I saw some of the cess that has been imposed. There's an agri cess. I understand you're devoluting so much to the states, you will want some funds of your own to invest. So there is an agri cess that's coming in, there's an infra cess that's coming in, which is going to make the cost of services and also the cost of products a lot higher. At the time when demand is a little muted, would you want to make services and products, even costlier?
Now, you see, with regard to the service tax, as the finance minister announced in his last budget speech, you see the service tax rates were earlier together with the cess, it was at about 12.34%. So in the last budget, it was taken to 14%. Then there was the Swachh Bharat cess of 0.5%, so 14.5%. And at that time, the finance minister had said that eventually the GST rate on services is going to be higher. It could be 16%, it could be 17% or whatever, that has to be decided. So eventually, I mean, when you are going to move to 16 or 17% tax, straight away you cannot take it from 12.5 to 16 because, that will cast a lot of additional burden suddenly. So therefore, a decision was taken to move in a very calibrated and in a very phased manner. Last year it was taken to 14. This year it has now been taken, then it was taken to 14.5 with that Swachh Bharat cess. Now 0.5 has been added and the Senvat benefit is also being given. So therefore the eventual burden to that extent will be minimized. Now coming to the point which Mukesh Butani made, you see the nominal GDP growth for next year is projected as at 11%. So therefore, a tax growth projection of which of about 11.7%. I think it is very much achievable, and the numbers have been looked into very carefully. And there is an additional resource mobilization also, which is primarily in the indirect tax side, which will fetch a net, which will result in a net gain of about 19,000 crores. So we are very clear about the numbers; they are achievable.
Numbers look achievable. I want to get closing comments, but before I do that, Maitri, to you, nominal GDP of 11%, spectrum auctions, or from telecom, they're looking to raise about 98,000 crores. Even divestment looks a little exaggerated given the track record. Do you want to raise a red flag there?
Fiscal match is concerned, I'm a little apprehensive, not so much on the tax revenue if the economy grows at 11%, which doesn't seem very unreasonable. If deflation reverses direction, we see positive inflation, which I think we are going to see. Then it is not so much the tax revenue that worries me as the non-tax revenue. Both on divestment as well on spectrum auction, we've made very ambitious and very aggressive estimates. And on the expenditure side, it's not just the recap money, which is insufficient. On pay commission, we made only an interim allowance. At the same time, subsidies, despite the huge saving in oil subsidies, we've actually overshot oil subsidy expenditure this year as compared to the budget estimate. Despite, and I'm repeating, despite the huge saving in oil subsidies, the subsidy burden has actually increased in this fiscal compared to the budget estimates. So given the fact that on the expenditure side we seem to have underestimated, on the revenue side we seem to have overestimated, I would think the chances of a slippage on fiscal deficit are quite high, which is perhaps the government is perhaps paving the ground for that to happen through the FRBM review.
Fair point indeed. You want to take a quick...
Shaktikant Das, you want to just counter that point before we get closing comments from all our panelists?
I would like to come in there. You see, with regard to the disinvestment target, there are two components of it. 36,000 crore is the disinvestment target, and 20,000 crore is the target under strategic disinvestment. So we have to therefore break it up, and 20,000 crore under strategic disinvestment, for which incidentally the guidelines have been issued by the government today. It is doable. Coming to spectrum, now it is 96,000 crore which is coming, of which about 20,000 crore is license fee. Now that comes every year. There is nothing unusual about it. There is no surprise about that. That 20,000 crore being a license fee will definitely come. Then we have assumed about 55-60,000 crores which will come out of fresh auctions. You have some leftover auctions from the last year. Plus, there are the new TRI recommendations, which incidentally project a revenue gain eventually of 5 lakh crores. But then again, as you know, as per our procedure, as per the current guideline, 25% of the auction amount is collectible in the first year. So therefore, we are looking at about 55,000 crores against TRI projection of 5 lakh crores. And then we have got arrears of about 35-40,000 crores in spectrum, which are locked up in litigation and in other areas. We have done our analysis and they are also collectible. They will be collected. Coming to the expenditure side, you see in expenditure side, in the petroleum and diesel side, the subsidies are gone, but still we have a kerosene and the LPG subsidy. In the LPG, 75 lakh LPG has been, connections have been voluntarily surrendered. Kerosene, now government has introduced DBT in kerosene, and this whole framework, the legal framework which the finance minister has announced to have for, the Aadhaar framework, and the Aadhaar framework for DBT in all kinds of government subsidies, that is going to definitely result in lot of savings. Pay commission provisions have been suitably made. The finance minister said that interim provisions have been made. We have to wait for the recommendations of the committee. There are three components of the recommendation of the 7th Pay Commission. One is the salary, the pay component, then there are the allowances component, and then there is the pension component. So therefore, we have to wait for the recommendations of the committee, which one would expect they would come probably within the next few months, and then based on that decision would be taken. So let me assure you that we have done our homework and that the numbers are credible. That's why in the beginning I said that this is a credible budget, because the numbers have been very carefully worked out.
All right, you've made a strong pitch there for the budget and for the numbers in the budget. Let me now ask my panel if they are convinced and get their final ratings as well. Swami, this afternoon, soon after the finance minister delivered the speech, you gave a rating of 6.5 on 10, which by your standards, having done budget telecasts with you for years now, is pretty good. It's a rating that the finance minister should be happy with. Now that you're reading the fine print, now that you've seen that convincing pitch made there by Shaktikanta Das and by Amitabh Kant as well, do you want to reconsider a rating, revise it upwards, downwards? What's your verdict?
No, I will stick to that. I think 6.5 out of 10. It's a good budget. Various things that they haven't done. For instance, the corporate tax, which we have not discussed. I mean, to me, the big structural change was reducing from 30 to 25. And you've done a couple of little baby steps. At this rate, I just don't see you getting to 25. You left too much. Not enough has been done, I would say, in this particular year on this big structural reform. An easy reform to have done was to convert part of the specific into ad valorem in the case of the oil taxes. So when the price of oil goes up again, automatically the same will come in. Such an obvious thing to do. Why didn't you do it? I keep saying, why don't you tax BDs? It's such an obvious thing to do. Why don't you legalize and tax cricket betting so obviously? So to my mind, there are lots of lost opportunities, very different from Maithili's lost opportunities. Maithili's lost opportunities, in my view, many of them are opportunities to lose money through third-rate investment. To me, the real lost opportunity is collecting easy, low-hanging fruit.
I wonder if Maithili wants to counter you on the opportunities to lose money there.
Oh, no, I don't quite agree with Swami, but I think I will give the government the benefit of the doubt in terms of its maths. We have to wait to see next year to see whether these numbers work out. I hope I'm wrong and Mr. Shaktikanta Das is right. I wouldn't mind that. I'd be quite happy to go with that, but I do stick by my feeling that it is a missed opportunity. Government had an opportunity to spend on the right things, and they were on the right track. They could have done it a little bit more. So my rating would be 5 on 10.
Dr. Mayaram, before I get to your rating, somewhere along the line there was this whole elitist tag that was the charges were beginning to be leveled against the government. Was an attempt also made today to undo that tag?
Absolutely. I think this one major outcome of this budget is a rebalancing in terms of the optics, that it's not purely a corporate government and so on. And then there is now a little more emphasis on what the majority living in rural areas, the poor, etc., that they also are being looked at with care.
So your final rating was 7 in the morning. Have you changed your mind by now?
No, I think I can't change the rating from 7 to anything else. I think old habits also die hard. So having been in the seat there, I know how difficult it is to do these budgets. But I would certainly like to urge Shaktikant, who's in a very hot seat at the moment, to very closely watch the implementation. And perhaps it would be very good if in 6 months' time there's a report card on how much has been implemented and how much is yet to be implemented. I think that is something which everybody would watch.
Before I come to Mr. Mukesh Butani, who's going to get the last word, Mr. Amitabh Kant, there's an important point here made by Dr. Arvind Mayaram as well, that there seems to be an attempt to kind of change the narrative, you know, to sort of rebalance the optics, to be seen as a government that's as concerned about, you know, rural distress as it is about, you know, attracting foreign investment, where the government has made a very good pitch over the last few months. Do you think that's a conscious attempt?
No, it's a conscious attempt, and I think it's been very ably undertaken. This exercise has been very ably undertaken by putting in a lot of resources into rural development, agriculture, infrastructure, irrigation, and so on. You know, but I think the real challenge lies in how well we are able to monitor, how well we are able to evaluate. Arvind talked about a 6 months balance sheet, but I really think that we should actually monitor and implement on a fortnightly basis, because the real challenge lies in what has been set out in the budget, in our ability to deliver, in our ability to implement, in our ability to monitor so well that we get results out of what the finance minister, the grand vision, the big plan that the finance minister spelled out in his budget. And that's a big task, big challenge in terms of delivering on ground.
Mukesh Butani, I'm going to let you have the last word. You've heard everyone. I've not got a rating for you in the afternoon as well.
So
what's your sense?
Give us a number now.
Well, I don't know if it matters if I give any numbers, but and I don't want to be a prisoner of any numerical number, but I think the budget is good because there is something for everyone. I think the other important, I know we were very focused on bank capitalization, whether 25,000 crores is adequate or not, but there is lots on the financial sector reforms, which I think would tend to address the menace of, you know, stressed balance sheets of the bank. So I would say that I would wait to see the rest of the legislative agenda in the budget session and in the monsoon session of the parliament, and my focus really would be on what is this code on resolution of financial firms, because this is now supposed to be operating as an integrated part of the bankruptcy code. And I doubt if the bankruptcy code will go through the passage in the budget session of the parliament. So, you know, you really have second and the third quarter to wait. The second is the amendments to the SURFACE law, because this now makes investments by asset reconstruction company 100% open for FDI, including my non-institutional investors. So I think that's also the government's way of bringing the money back. And the third thing that, you know, I was unable to get a clear answer in the earlier panel is, what is this range-bound fiscal deficit target? You know, how is it going to work? And finally, I did not see much being spoken about the debt to GDP ratio, and we are just focused on this magical figure of fiscal deficit target. So I think a debt management coupled with, the range-bound amendment to the FRBM law is something that we need to wait and see how it works out.
All right, so on that note, we do have a final word on the panel.
Yes, thank you so much, Swami, Maithili, Dr. Mararam, and Mr. Mukesh Butani.